Do it.
My name is Nalley COF, and I'm doing my speech on euthanasia. Euthanasia is very broad and always defined in a different way. So I provided my own definition, which is the act or practice of ending the life of an individual suffering from a terminal illness or an incurable condition, as by lethal injection or the suspension of extraordinary medical treatment. My major claim is terminally ill patients could benefit from euthanasia. My secondary claims are, number one, everyone has the right to personal freedom and self-government, as is stated by many laws. Number two, euthanasia allows patients to die with dignity. Number three, it could reduce the medical costs. And number four, I'm going to provide some examples of euthanasia being adapted into societies. Okay, so the United States was founded on the principles of individual liberty, personal privacy, and equality, which is why it broke away from Britain. Now, such principles ensure that each individual is free to make the most intimate decisions, free from government interference and discrimination. In 1965, Griswold versus Connecticut, and in 73, Roe versus Wade, and Doe versus Bolton, the Supreme Court recognized the right to privacy, which entitles each individual to make their own decision, keep their matters to themselves. Also, under Constitution in Section 8 of Article 1, the Constitution and the Section 5 of the 14th Amendment allows Congress to facilitate interstate commerce and to prevent the state interference with interstate commerce, liberty, or equal protection of the laws. Which means that Congress has the duty to protect our laws, and our right to privacy and our right for personal liberty have to be guarded. So now, autonomy is the right of self-government and personal freedom, right? Since death is the most personal of all things, the individual should have the right to indicate when they die and what circumstances they do so. Forcing them to stay alive against their own will is pretty much going against their autonomy, They would have to follow somebody else's judgment and do what someone else says rather than act on their own leads. Those against euthanasia often claim that patients are too affected by their illness to make a coherent decision as to end their lives, but I think not, because you base your decisions on how you feel and how certain things affect you. Therefore, regardless of your situation, you should be able to do what it is that you want. Okay. My other point was euthanasia allows patients to die with dignity. A lot of the people who would be affected who would want to use euthanasia are major elderly people, right? They need housing assistance, assisted living, which means that somebody always has to take them to the restroom, shower them, bathe them, clean after them, feed them. It's really not having your own dignity, because you need somebody to take care of you as you were a baby. You're no longer an actual, a person who could do everything on their own. So being allowed to end your life with misery should be allowed. It's not right to substitute the quality of life for the quantity of life. Just to make your life longer, it doesn't mean it's going to make it any better. Treatments often try to elongate your life, but you still have the pain, and you still have a lot of bad pills and chemotherapy to take, which only harms you. When it comes to the cost of it, 45% of all long-term care spending goes to nursing homes. Nursing homes are extremely expensive. The cheapest ones are from $1,000 to $5,000 a month. Not just anyone could pay that, especially not with Social Security benefits. Medicare and Medicaid do help pay for those who need assisted living, but they don't cover everything. If you can't pay it, they usually take your estate, like your house. They will take it as repayment, and Medicare, which is an insurance, charges you 20% of whatever it is it costs the government to keep you alive. Meaning, out of $55,000, which is the average year cost, you have to pay $11,000 back, even if you make no money. The cost has harmed. The cost of treating those who are terminally ill is affecting all of us, because all of our insurances are going up. It used to cost $7,000 to treat a patient with lung cancer, and now it costs $40,000. We could not afford it. Increasing the cost may actually be preventing some Medicare benefits from getting cancer treatment they need. So if you can't give a person their treatment because they can't afford it, then why not just let them die? Either way, they're going to die. They're just going to suffer more. Some societies have adapted euthanasia, which has been the Netherlands. They're usually the first. But they're very broad. They don't actually have a straight law that says how you can or can't kill a person. So theirs is very vague. Oregon is the only state in the United States that has allowed a certain form of euthanasia, and they do follow a very strict criteria. So it eliminates the problems of like slippery slope when doctors just kill rather than helping people. Like, yeah, they don't kill just anyone. They just do it to a person who follows the criteria. So in conclusion, euthanasia allows the greatest good for the greatest number of people because the patient's suffering is removed, the family can grieve properly, and they will no longer have to take such high costs. And the high costs of terminal care for patients are removed.
Thank you. All right. Early on, I thought there were some good organizational things you had. The secondary claims laid out. You clearly stated what the topic was. You signposted your first point pretty clearly, but after that I didn't think that you were as consistent about that, and by the time you got to the end of the speech it seemed to me as if you were kind of wandering around on the subject, and it lost the forward momentum that you had started with. The controversy is relatively clear. I do think that you get caught up in value issues substantially on that first point. The references to other court policies on similar issues on privacy are okay, but there's no reference, for instance, to any court rulings on the issue of physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia or right to die or any of those kinds of things. And there are court rulings on those issues, but they're not a part of this argument, and as a consequence that undermines the credibility of your claim to some degree. I didn't think that you were consistent about citing sources. It sounded like you had information that was coming from someplace, but you didn't always tell us where that information was from. Especially in the last half of the speech, it seemed like you were kind of figuring out what your argument was as you went along instead of having had it planned and being pretty clear, this is the point or the objective that I'm trying to get to. And then you kind of get caught up in the cost issue, and I'm not sure that the cost issue is the right kind of thing that you want to get into when it comes to euthanasia, because let's face it, it's just cheaper to get rid of people, period, you know, so why don't we just say at 70 we're not going to spend any money on you anymore and be done with it, and that would be cheaper. But that, of course, is not necessarily a value that we would see as being acceptable, and that's the problem when you get to this issue and you include a cost comparison. It's hard to make those arguments without also making value arguments about them too, and I think that that's problematic. There seems to be an assumption that somebody's life, their quality of life has disappeared because they need assistance, and I think you know, again, that's a value argument, but you need to develop an explanation about why needing assistance means that you don't have a quality of life. Now, I might be really uncomfortable if I had to sit around having somebody change me every day or dress me and that sort of thing, but the truth of the matter is I didn't feel that way when I was 18 months old, and I'm not sure that everybody who is 75 or 90 and has those problems feels that way. So it's a question of You know, we're back to how do people perceive it, and you don't have any examples, you don't have any testimony from people who feel this way about that. It just seems to be a presupposition. So I think you need to develop that point a little bit more. All right.